will help in attracting pollinators to your gardens. Whether you have a small orchard or a few fruit trees or vegetables and herbs that you need pollinating. Remember, yellows and reds are very good for attracting pollinators uh, for themselves and nearby garden plants. And of course, we all want our fruit trees. It's nice to have fruit trees, and they're pretty when they're in green leaf and when they're especially in the spring in bloom. But the main reason we plant them is for fruit production, and pollinators are essential to that. Well, our bedding plants can help in attracting those pollinators. And depending on where you're at, geraniums are a perennial in warmer climates, but they can also be used as bedding plants. And many temperate areas will put uh, a mixture of geraniums. This happens to be in Southern California, where they can last several seasons. In Southern Nevada, something like this firecracker plant can replace annuals. And I'm always amazed at how well some plants do. So I always encourage my students, be observant. When you're driving around, look at other landscapes. If you'd ask me, will the firecracker plant grow in full sun in Bullhead City at 110 degrees, surrounded by asphalt, cement, and rock? I'd say, yeah, I don't think so. But here's a picture of some that are doing that. And so I learn everywhere I go whether or not, what plants do and do not do well in areas. Those that survive drought, go by an abandoned house, say, oh, look at what plants survived when the water was turned off and those that didn't. What's growing alongside of the road. So everywhere you go, you can learn something about horticulture. So here we have in Botanical Garden down in Southern California, we have a mixture of perennials and bedding plants. So it depends on the climate. And certainly if you love agaves or other desert plants that won't do well in Reno, say, uh, take them out for the summer. People have done that a long time, and then find a place to store them. We all do it. Um, it's just the type of plant we do it with. I love adeniums, desert rose. They do not do well here below 50 degrees or anywhere. So I have to bring those in here, not only because they might rot, but if we get below 32, they will freeze. But I pay that price because I love them in my landscape, and I take them out as soon as the temperature is above 50 at night, and they spend the rest of the summer until it drops again outside, blooming and adding to my landscape. In more humid areas, in particular, tropicals are used as bedding plants. This happens to be Alamanda. It's a bush form. This happened to be in a tropical garden, but certainly I've seen this being used as a bedding plant in humid, temperate areas in the summertime. Here we have spider plant, which is fairly hardy for us here in southern Nevada, year-round outside, but crotons aren't. And this happens to be in a garden in Arkansas, I believe. And you see a rubber tree back there in a container, and this wonderful patio planting of spider plant and crotons adding color. That won't last all year there, but during the hot, humid summer, it thinks it's in the tropics. So either they will just dispose of this at the end of the growing season, or if they have a greenhouse, they'll keep it through the greenhouse and bring it back out. in the spring. Other plants, this happens to be in Dallas. Dallas can get cold. They went down to 3 degrees for several nights a couple of years ago. They have copper plant and tapioca plant. The copper plant in particular is extremely cold sensitive, but it loves the hot, humid summer there. So it becomes a temporary bedding plant for display. And they also use a lot of other tropicals for this massive display in the gardens. Not all these will grow in Nevada. Many of them that need higher humidity will do all right in the northern area for the short period of summer where there is heat and some humidity. But it doesn't have to be just tropicals. You can use non-tropicals. Here, this is a large, well-pruned pine tree you see in a large container. It's a little over 6 feet tall, container and tree. And then they plant underneath it each year. So you have a combination. You have the focal point of this small dwarfed pine, and then color throughout the year added. Maintenance is an important part, especially if you want flowers all year. We do not want to, or through the growing season, we do not want to necessarily produce seed. Once the plant begins producing seed, then it's met its purpose in life. Some are seedless and they have a tendency to flower longer and better. But whether you're in a nursery, as in this case, cutting all the dead flowers off, it's called deadheading, makes for a more beautiful plant that you're trying to sell. But it also keeps them blooming, and you will need to do that in the garden. If you have baskets up in the air, you're going to have to water quite frequently, especially when we have 5 to 10% humidity. So choose the right plant for the right time of year. We don't want to grow warm season plants in winter, etc. So in southern Nevada in particular, we have planting times of winter, spring, summer, and fall, and they overlap. Summer is probably the smallest palette of plants that we can put out, but there are a lot of plants such as the vincas, and there are new, more dwarf varieties of lantana that we can use as bedding plants that will thrive during the hot, dry summers. We need to be replacing the plant material throughout the year, or if a disease comes in. In commercial plantings in particular, when they're doing large renovations several times a year, most large commercial areas will take soil out and put new soil in. This prevents disease problems and keeps the soil revitalized. Now, you don't have to do that in your beds. Just change the particular types of annuals or bedding plants that you put in, but also watch for disease and insect problems and be able to identify them correctly. That's important. So, need to prepare the bed. If it's one that has been used for a year or more, such as this one, it's a focal point. You may want to take out several inches of the soil, maybe down to 6 inches or better, and replace it with fresh soil. Don't throw that soil necessarily out. You can always compost it if you can heat it up high enough to kill weed and disease organisms. And see the little green pellets there, hopefully? That's fertilizer. A good time-release fertilizer is always good to incorporate. That way you don't have to worry about, trying to get in there and fertilize. Disease can always be a problem, especially if you're repeating the same plants year after year. The other thing that people do is that they just keep replacing. We have some dead plants here near the front row. Don't just go in. If you start seeing a disease moving through this planting bed, just taking out the dying and dead ones and putting the same plants in will not solve the problem, especially if you're not using a fungicide. And you need to know what the disease is to have the right uh, fungicide to use on it. So in this case, it looks like it's going to spread, and I happen to know it did. And so what needed to be done was take this whole bed of plants out, put something in that's not susceptible to the disease you think it is, or dig the soil out and revitalize it. Most commercial maintenance companies don't do that unless you pay extra. But again, even on beautiful ground such as this one in San Diego, this is all, half the bed is in flower, the other half is dying, as you can see in the close-up. In this case, in this commercial bed, it's a limited area. Just take all the soil out, down a foot or better, and put in new soil. Again, here we have vincas. They're dying back, and they'll keep putting the same ones in rather than taking this out and putting something new in, maybe like the salvia that's doing well here. And you can see dieback in these vincas, even in the nursery pots. So be careful when you're buying. Look around. Now, sometimes this is due to poor maintenance, but it may be disease as well. And then do your do your research. And I only laugh because Jeff and I and some other colleagues were at the Dallas Botanic Gardens, and we're looking, and here are all these funny spots all over the leaves. Was it an insect? Was it a disease? We have some blotches here on these impatiens, and so we couldn't leave it alone, and so jumped into the bed, and it turned out they had used either a pelletized insecticide or fertilizer, weren't quite sure. It'd gone on to wet leaves and started to run here, but it stuck very well to the leaves. They should have washed it off. But just looking at it, we thought, oh my God, what is in here destroying these beautiful impatiens? And it was someone not applying this material correctly and washing it off the leaves. Buying plants, it is hard to walk into a nursery and see these magnificent displays of plant material and then want to rush out, buy it, and rush home and plant all of them. Now, number one rule in buying any plant, remember, just because it's sold in your area doesn't mean it will grow and thrive in your area. And so we have these little primroses. This is all mostly, all cool season for the Tucson area at this nursery. So that's good. If they were selling these in Tucson or Las Vegas in June or July, you wouldn't want to buy them. So no, do your homework. Check with your horticulturist in your extension office. Do a little bit of research online. Make sure it's from a reputable source, however. This is what it looks like in the spring, even here in southern Nevada. This is at one of our fine nurseries in southern Nevada, and they bring the color in because people want it, and it sells very well. However, they will cut it off at a certain point. They do the same with vegetables. Once it's past time to plant vegetables, they'll just say, well, go down to your big box hardware store. They're still selling vegetables. We don't sell them because it's too late in the season. Know the season, buy it when it first comes off the truck, and they'll make your yard just beautiful. You can buy them in all sizes of containers. They come in 1 gallon. Boy, that gives you you can plant them with very little space in between, and you have an eye-popping bed. The next choice would be the quartz that you see here on the right with ranunculus. Now that's a bulbous, they're not true bulbs, but plant, but you can buy them. You can buy tulips already growing and flowering, but the ranunculus will flower much longer. Of course, 6-packs and 8-packs. 8-packs are a little better. Here we have petunias, violets or pansies in bloom here, and you can already see them. Vegetable plants on the other side. Veggies, if they're not too big, I will buy in 6-packs, but I don't want much smaller than this if I'm going to put color in. Pull it out very gently, squeeze the bottom of the container. You see roots already coming out the bottom here, and you want to break this up a little bit. Be gentle, or take your X-Acto knife and make some slits, because you want those roots to quit growing in that configuration, and you want to encourage them spreading out. I've seen large plantings that annuals put out and in beds, and they didn't break it up at all, and within a week or two they were having problems. The plants were growing, but the root system wasn't establishing, and you need to get in any plant an established root system. So you have a lot of choices, and you want to pick the right plant for the time of year and the right size container for yourself. Now, peat pots are kind of popular among some people. Again, you want to break down the top of the peat pot so it doesn't wick water away from the roots of the plants. And then you want to separate the root ball some. And this can be your X-Acto knife. You can slit the sides of it. They don't break down as readily as they should here.